Hello everyone, welcome to the channel. I hope you're having a great day. So today we are going to adjust the camber on the rear A-arms of our Honda Pioneer. So let me show you what I'm talking about. So on this Honda Pioneer, the top of the tires, the camber doesn't show up very well, but they are in. I took my handy dandy measuring tool and they're in about 2.5 to 3 degrees. So in order to adjust these, we're going to go ahead and we're going to loosen this jam nut and we're going to turn these in. It sounds really easy, except for in order to get here, you have to pretty much remove the A-arm because there's just not enough room to pop this up and twist it. So we'll end up removing the sway bar, the lower knuckle bolts, the shock, and these bolts. We'll twist them in and then we'll reassemble. Now, for those of you wondering why my camber is so far out, it's really easy. Previously, before I installed my Viking 814 shocks, I had the factory load leveling shocks. And I was running the high lifter 2 or 2.5 inch lift, whatever it is. And since I've put the new shocks on there, I've taken the lift off for a couple reasons. One, the shocks, they go ahead and they give you an extra inch or two of lift. And number two, I just didn't need it to clear these tires with my A-arms. So the camber on these A-arms is set for that high lifter lift. And then the load leveling shocks. So my camber actually looked the same when my Pioneer would sit for a couple, 3 hours. And then as soon as I hit some bumps, those load leveling shocks would pump up and it was pretty set dead on where I wanted it. I'm looking almost for a zeroed out camber, and that's my personal preference, so that when I put some weight in the back of this, it'll go in and the tires won't be at such a drastic angle when I'm moving my big trailer. So let's go ahead, let's get this apart. I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna get the rear tires off, get it jacked up, some jack stands underneath it. The first thing we need to do to adjust the camber on this is remove the sway bar. And let me show you how that's done. This is your sway bar, as you can see it goes across. So what we need to do is we need to take this cap off right here. And underneath that, which is a 14 millimeter, you're going to find a 5 millimeter hex head that goes into the sway bar with the locking nut behind it. So let's go ahead and get that off. Once you get the cap off, if you look in here at the end, right there, a little light showing it, is a 5 millimeter hex head that has this locking into it. So we're going to put a wrench on here, a ratchet there, and remove the sway bar. So now that I have the sway bar off, the next thing to do is to remove the shock. So if you're running stock shocks or something without limit straps, it's going to be a little bit easier for you. Me, I have a limit strap, so it's one extra step. Not too big of a deal. Let me show you what's going on. So I have my jack supporting the wheel. So I can get this limit strap off, take this off, and then I can take off the 2 locking nuts. And then we'll slowly lower the jack down so there's no pressure on the shock. Now the other way I could do it is I could loosen the lock rings on here, take all the tension off here, do some measurements. It's not what I want to do. I have this set up just the way I want it. So it's going to be very hard to get it back on, but I'll show you how to do that when we reassemble. After I get the shock off, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to wipe everything down to get it a little bit cleaner, and then we're going to remove the bolts back there. So let's In order to get this bolts out, we're just going to slowly lower our jack. Okay, so we got the shock off. So we'll go ahead and let this all the way So now there's two ways you can do this. You can completely remove the whole A-arm, or you can just remove the bolts in the back. And that's what we're gonna do. We're just gonna remove these back bolts, drop it down. So make sure you loosen your locking nuts. With the Super ATV A-arms, this is a 17mm bolt, so we'll get that done. So I've got the nuts off, pop the bolts out. One. Two. Now an interesting fact is when I installed the Super ATV A-arms, there was a washer on the front, on the inside, so I left it there. Don't know if it's needed, but I like it. So now what I'll do is I'm just going to pick this up, pull everything out. Now that I have this out, I can unthread this and screw it in as far as I desire. When you're adjusting the camber on these A-arms, it's kind of a game. They come from the factory preset, which gives you a good ballpark. I'm going to turn mine in 4 turns. That should put me in a pretty good area to get it back to a 0-degree camber, but we'll see. So don't get upset if you don't get it right the first time. It's a game. You gotta assemble, reassemble. This whole process doesn't take too long. But remember, when you get everything back together, you still have to bounce it around, drive it just a little bit to get everything to settle, because right now it's in the air. So let's get these adjusted. So now I have everything adjusted. I've turned my turnbuckle in, or camber adjustment, whatever you want to call it, in 4 turns. I haven't tightened the locking nuts yet. I'll do that when it's on the ground. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead. I've wiped everything down real quickly with my favorite degreaser. I'm going to grease everything up. I'm going to reassemble that. And it's not real hard. I'm not going to show you on the camera, but it's just putting the 2 bolts back in here, but we're not going to tighten them yet. I was always taught you never tighten the bolts on your A-arm until you have the weight of the vehicle on it. And it's not real hard to get to with the A-arms on there. You know, you gotta reach around the tire, but it's not a big deal. The reason being is you're gonna put all the tension right down here on these bushings. And those bushings can bind up, and you're gonna basically set a preload, is how I was always taught. So what we'll do is I'll get this reassembled and greased, and then I'm going to show you the trick I have to put the shock back on. And then we've got something else to do before we can finish it. Okay, so I've got the rear bolts on. These nuts are just started hand tight because I need to tighten them up with the weight on there, like I said. And I want to put some blue thread locker on there. I have the shock back on, which is pretty easy to do. Let me show you. So I have my bolt with my washers, the locking bolts, or the second nuts, the locking nut, another washer. But here's the problem. I don't know if you can see the distance there. I got 2 or 3 inches. So we can cheat, and I can jack up the shock a little bit. The problem is I'll get to the point of I can't get it up high enough. It'll be really close, because now I'm starting to lift the whole machine up and I just can't get it. So what I'll do is open my door, and I actually have an axle strap right here. Just go on down. So I loop it down around my wheel spacer, and I just basically compress the A-arm without lifting the vehicle. And then, as you can see, it goes on just like that. So let me get that tightened up and off to the next step. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is kind of a do-it-your-own-risk thing. I'm doing it. I know the consequences of doing it, but let me show you. We're going to remove the sway bar. So we already have the sway bar end link off. I put the nut and the cap back on for future reinstallation if I need to. And other than that, on both sides, there's only 1 bolt right there and one on the other side, and then 2 more on that side. The easiest way to get this out, from what I've been told, is release all the bolts and snake it through. Being very careful of the drive shaft right there. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna take this out. Now, there's a couple reasons I'm taking it out. One, I've been waiting to take it out so I can get more independent wheel travel. But my concern was on-road driving. So with on-road driving, you're gonna get a little bit more body roll. With my new Viking shocks, my body roll should be alleviated a little bit versus stock shocks, because I can turn the compression and rebound up if needed. Right now I have it set on 5, which is super soft, but we'll see. I also have my springs cranked up just a little bit, because right now I don't have any weight in the back this, but typically when we go riding, I have a family of 5. So they're settled and everything is perfect. The other deal is I'm not going to throw it away, I'm not going to cut it up, I'm not going to get rid of it like some people, because if it comes out I don't like the feel, I can always reinstall it. Again, it's only 6 bolts to reinstall. So I'm taking this off for more articulation essentially, but let's go ahead, let's get this off and I'll show you what it looks like when I get it out. Okay, so I got the sway bar out. I actually had to take it out through the driver's side, so the camera didn't really catch that. But it is definitely easier to get the sway bar off if you don't have a shock on. So again, hindsight's 20/20, learn from my mistakes. If you're gonna remove the sway bar, let's take the shock off. I had already put the shocks and limit straps back on, so I didn't want to do that. So it took me a few minutes of finagling. So this is what your sway bar looks like. And here's your bushings that go with them. So this is the driver's side bushing, and these just go over the sway bar and actually sit like this. So the driver's side cover is a little bit different. It's your passenger, and then here's your passenger side cover. You see this part right here, that is to protect it from the drive line, I'm assuming, because it's right there. So I'm going to take my bushings, my nuts, put them in a baggie and save them for later. But this is what it's going to look like, nice and clean. Make sure when you pull it out, you don't ding up your drive line. And I actually pulled mine out. I had to go over the axle, and then I fed it through here around to you. If I would left the shock off, it would be much easier. So now I got the sway bar off, I got the shocks installed, get everything back on. I'm gonna go ahead and clean up, get the sway bar put away, put the tires back on, get some weight on this thing, and then I'm gonna go back up and I'm going to tighten these bolts. I gotta go look at the torque spec one more time because I didn't look at it this morning. So after that, we should be good to go and take it for a test drive. Well, I got it all back together. I've double checked all the bolts. I got the inner A-arm bolts tightened up with the weight on it. I've made sure everything was greased. The big thing is, don't forget, is this jam nut. Make sure these are tight. Those are all tight on mine. I've double checked everything, put some blue Loctite on these. So my camber is still a little bit off. I got a little too crazy. I probably need to take 2 turns out of it. I am 1.5 degrees positive camber on this side, 1 degree positive camber on that side. I am not gonna worry about it, because once I put my kids back here, put the cooler, my tools, whatever, some weight, it is going to settle just a little bit, or if I'm towing a trailer or something. Ride and handling, to be honest, I can't tell much difference. The only time I could tell is when I came in the driveway and I hit the curb. I didn't squeal the tires and it wasn't as harsh, but I could have come in a little slower this time, I don't know. I did take some turns pretty quick on my test drive, but I like it so far, so we'll see how it does. So don't forget to give me a big thumbs up if you like the video. Don't forget to subscribe, and until next time.